Imagine you wake up one morning, check the news, and see that a war has just broken out somewhere in the world, thousands of miles away. Nothing to do with you. You feel terrible about it. You scroll through the headlines. You maybe share a post. And then you go fill up your car with gas and nearly have a heart attack at the pump. $40, $60, $80 for the same tank of gas you filled last month for half the price. And somewhere in a glass office building, a group of executives in expensive suits are quietly smiling. Because while the world is panicking, they are printing money. Here's the question nobody really stops to ask. Why? Why does war, chaos, destruction, human suffering somehow translate into record profits for oil companies? And more importantly, what does that tell us about how money actually works in this world? Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to see the global economy in a completely different way. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. Most people have a very simple idea about how prices work. They think, if something costs more, it's because it's harder to get. Supply goes down, price goes up. Simple economics, right? And that part is actually true. But here's where most people stop thinking, and where the real story begins. They assume that when oil prices rise, oil companies are just passing on the cost. Like they're victims too, just trying to survive, caught in the same storm as the rest of us. That's the story we're told. That's the story we believe. But let's look at what actually happens to oil company profits during periods of war and global conflict. In 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine and the world was in shock, ExxonMobil recorded its highest profit in its 152-year history. Shell nearly doubled its annual profit. BP made more money in 1 year than it had in almost a decade. These weren't struggling companies barely keeping the lights on. These were companies having the best financial years of their lives, while regular people were choosing between filling their gas tank and buying groceries. So, what's actually going on here? Let's break this down simply. Think of oil like water in a very thirsty town. There's only one well, and one company controls it. Now imagine a storm hits, and suddenly half the roads to the well are blocked. Less water gets through. People are desperate. And the company that controls the well, they can now charge whatever they want. That's the first piece of the puzzle, supply disruption. When war breaks out, especially in oil-rich regions like the Middle East or Russia, global oil supply gets cut off or threatened. Ships stop sailing through certain routes. Pipelines get shut down. Countries stop trading with each other. Less oil flows into the world. And when there's less of something that everyone desperately needs, the price goes up. Fast. But here's where it gets interesting and a little uncomfortable. The oil companies that weren't affected by the conflict, the ones in Texas, Norway, Canada, or the Gulf of Mexico, regions far from the fighting, they're still pumping the same amount of oil they always were. Their costs haven't changed. Their workers are still getting paid the same. Their machines are running just as they always have. But they're now selling that same oil at double or triple the price. Let me give you a simple comparison. Imagine you sell apples. You grow them yourself. It costs you $1 to grow each apple. You normally sell them for $2. You make $1 profit per apple. Now imagine a storm destroys most of the apple farms across the country, but not yours. Suddenly apples are scarce. People are desperate. And now you can charge $5 per apple. Your costs are still $1. But now you're making $4 profit per apple instead of $1. You didn't do anything differently. You didn't work harder. You didn't invest more. The chaos around you just made your product more valuable. That's exactly what happens to oil companies during war. The conflict didn't raise their costs. It just raised everyone's prices. And they collect the difference. Now here's where it gets really fascinating. And this is the part most finance videos completely skip over. Why do we accept this? Why does society just allow it? Here's the psychological answer. We anchor our anger to the wrong thing. When you're at the gas pump watching the numbers spin, you're angry at the price. You're angry at the situation. You might even be angry at the government. But you're rarely angry at the specific mechanism that's making someone else rich. This is something psychologists call diffuse blame. When something bad happens and there are many factors involved, a war, a government policy, a global market, our brain struggles to assign blame clearly. So we end up blaming everything vaguely and holding no one truly accountable. Oil companies understand this better than almost any industry on Earth. They've spent decades and billions of dollars making sure that when prices go up, you blame geopolitics. You blame the president. You blame instability. You blame the market, not them. There's another psychological trick at play here too. Necessity blindness. Oil isn't like buying a new pair of shoes. You can choose not to buy the shoes, but you need to get to work. You need to heat your home. You need to transport food to your family. When something is a necessity, people will pay almost any price for it. They have no choice. And companies that control necessities know this. It's why Warren Buffett once said that the best business to own is one that has pricing power, the ability to raise prices without losing customers. And few industries have more pricing power than energy during a crisis. Here's the deeper insight I want you to really sit with. War doesn't create wealth for oil companies. It redistributes wealth from you to them. Every extra dollar you spend at the gas pump during a conflict goes somewhere. That money doesn't disappear. It flows. And a significant chunk of it flows directly into the profits of companies and their shareholders. This is one of the most uncomfortable truths about how money works globally. Someone else's crisis is often someone else's opportunity. And before you think this is just about oil, it's not. War drives up the price of wheat because major wheat exporters get disrupted. Defense companies see their stock prices surge. Shipping companies make record profits when sea routes get rerouted. Even certain tech companies benefit when governments pour money into surveillance and security infrastructure. Crisis and profit are deeply connected in the modern economy. Not because anyone is evil, though some decisions certainly raise moral questions, but because our entire economic system is built around scarcity. Whoever controls something scarce, especially during a crisis, accumulates wealth. That's the rule of the game. Now here's what really shifts your thinking. The ultra-wealthy don't just understand this rule, they position themselves for it in advance. When tensions rise in a region, certain investors quietly shift money into energy stocks, into defense, into commodities. They're not predicting the future with certainty. They're simply following the logic of scarcity. By the time the evening news announces the conflict, they've already made their move. By the time you're shocked at the gas pump, they're already calculating their returns. This isn't inside information in many cases. It's just paying attention to patterns that most people never think about. So what do you actually do with this information? First, stop being financially surprised by crises. Historically, major global disruptions, wars, pandemics, political conflicts, always create winners and losers in the economy. Most people become the losers simply because they're caught off guard. The way to not be caught off guard is to start thinking in systems rather than headlines. Second, understand the concept of inflation-resistant assets. When wars break out and currencies weaken, physical commodities, oil, gold, food, land, tend to hold or gain value. This is why financially educated people often keep a portion of their wealth in real assets rather than just cash sitting in a savings account. Cash loses value when inflation hits. Real assets often don't. Third, if you invest, understand what sectors benefit from instability. This isn't about cheering for conflict. Nobody wants war. But if you are an investor, even through a basic index fund, you're already exposed to these companies whether you know it or not. Understanding how they profit helps you make smarter, more informed decisions about where your money sits. And finally, recognize the difference between the story we're told about prices and the reality of who benefits. The next time you see a headline about oil prices surging, train yourself to ask, who is getting richer right now and why? That one simple habit, asking who benefits, will make you a fundamentally sharper financial thinker than most people around you. Here's the thought I want to leave you with. We live in a world where the rules of money are rarely explained clearly, where financial literacy is kept just confusing enough that most people give up trying to understand it. But the truth is, once you understand how wealth moves, how crises redirect money from the many to the few, how scarcity creates power, how the system rewards those who pay attention, you start to see the world differently. You stop being a passive passenger in the economy and start being someone who actually understands the road. You don't have to be the oil company. You don't have to own wells or control pipelines. But you do have to understand that money follows logic, even in chaos. Especially in chaos. The people at the top of the wealth pyramid aren't necessarily smarter than you. They're not working harder. They've just spent more time learning the rules of the game that everyone else is playing blindly. And now, you know one more rule. Use it wisely. If this video gave you even one new way of seeing how money works, hit the like button. It helps more people find this content. And subscribe if you want to keep pulling back the curtain on how wealth really works in the world. See you in the next one.